Access 2007, calculate with queries. There is no doubt about it. You have data in your tables that you'd like to calculate. So we are going to create a new field in a query that will take our price and multiply it times our quantity to give us our line item total. There's another way that you can total in your query as well. In fact, it's new to Access 2007, and it's in the data sheet view of your query, and it allows you to see not only the sum of all the values in an entire field, but also you can just see what the minimum value is, or the maximum value, or even the standard deviation among all the values that are stored in a specific field or column. There's another totals tool that allows you to group and sum at the same time, and then crosstab queries are sometimes a bit of a secret treasure, if you will, of Access. They've been around for ages, and it allows you to compare different fields against each other to really have that data targeted at the audience. It's very succinct, it's very clear, and it's very easy to understand for your reader when they look at the query, or if you print it out into a report, so they get that point immediately. Well, we can see here there's many calculations to be done, so let's jump on into Access, into our zoo database, and start with a fresh new query. The first thing we're going to do is go to our Create ribbon and select Query Designer. From here, we're going to choose a couple tables. First, we'll choose Animal Food. I can choose Add. We'll also choose Food Orders. I can double click. Now I'll click Close, and I'll resize this grid area and choose a few fields. The first field is the order ID. I can double click to populate it down here. I can also click and drag. I'll take food name. I can go to the pull down menu here and I'll choose price. Let's see, that's in the animal food table. Dot price, that's the notation. The last way, or the last item, is quantity. I'll just click and drag that there. So there's 3 different ways that you can add fields to your grid area. Because I have 4 fields in this grid area and no criteria, I should see all records, but only the data in those 4 fields. Here I see my order ID, the product, or food, the price, and then the quantity. So our query worked. Let's go back into Design View. Oh, I want to show you something. When I clicked Run, let's see, I had 1,620 records. That is way off the mark. Access doesn't know what to do. If there's no relationship between 2 tables that you're pulling fields from, Access just multiplies each field times each other. So we see too many records here. Access took every occurrence of the order ID and had to display every occurrence of a food item in the table for each one of the order IDs. That's why we have an overabundance. Let's fix that first. Back into Design View, I'm going to drag food ID and drop it on food name. Now we have a relationship, and I can run this again. I haven't created a relationship that's going to stick throughout my database, just right here in the query. 81 records makes a lot more sense, because on this order ID, I'll make sure it's sorted. What was it, 10, 2, 3, 9? On this order ID, I see I only had 1 line item, bananas, instead of every single food that existed in the other table. Back into Design View, and we are ready to create a calculated field. The first thing you need to do is type in a new name for that field followed by a colon. I'll call it totals. However, you could have more than 1 word, and spaces are fine as well. You just simply type it however you want it to appear, followed by a colon. I'm going to zoom in so we can see more of the information. I'll right-click and select Zoom. From here, you need to encapsulate your fields within square brackets. I'd like to multiply the price, it is not case sensitive, times, so that's the asterisk, quantity. Quantity. That looks okay. All right. And I do want it to be displayed, so I'll make sure there's a check mark in that area to be shown, and I'll choose Run. Here, the name is totals. The price of 13 times 50 is $650. Access is smart in that it gave it the currency format because it picked up that one of the fields had currency in the base table. the reason why I was able to multiply these two together without Access throwing an error at me is because they're both calculatable data types. This is currency and quantity is a number. The data type of date also allows you to do calculations. So when you're creating your tables and you're trying to choose the data type, that's one criteria. Do I need to calculate this field? Because you might remember that text is your default data type, and text will accept numbers, so my quantity field could theoretically be a text field because I'm only typing in numbers, but I would not be able to do calculations if I did not have a calculatable data type. Back into Design View, and let's take a look at this item right here. Returning all records is the default, but what if I just like to see the top 5 records? I can run that. Here I can see the very top 5 records. Back into Design View, what if I'd like to see the top 25% of all my records? I can choose Run, and because it's a percentage, I'm not seeing 25 records, I'm just seeing the top 25% of the 81 records. Now I can go back into Design View once more. This is a query like any other, so I could put criteria in here. Bananas. Run, and I only have 2 orders that included bananas, one for 50 and one for 25. All right, let's save this query. I will call this one totals and click OK. It seems that I already have a query that's named totals. Do I want to replace it? Yes, that would be fine. I'll go back into Design View, and I can take out this criteria so it's not used later. So I've mentioned a new tool to Access 2000. It's in Datasheet View. I'll click Run, and it is underneath the Records area. When I click Totals, and this is the sigma symbol, you may be used to this if you've used Excel over the years and taken advantage of that auto sum feature that exists there. When I select this, I have a new row that appears at the bottom, and it shows nothing because I haven't decided what type of totals to view. I'd like to see a sum of all my orders, so I can select Sum here. Okay, almost $9,000 total I've spent on food. Boy, that's not all that much when you figure I'm feeding an entire zoo. How about quantity? I'd like to see the minimum quantity that I've ordered. That's a 10. How about the maximum quantity on an item, on an order? That was 200. I can take a look at the price as well. When I click in here, I could choose to see the average price per product, per food, per line item. That's $12 on average my food costs when I purchase that. This bar is going to exist no matter how often I scroll, no matter what record I'm on. I'm always going to see the total on the screen. It's frozen on the screen, if you will, and I like that because you can always just at a glance see what you're looking at regardless of how many records you are displaying. Now we're ready for a crosstab query. I'll close this. Do I want to save changes? Yeah, what the heck. And close this query. This time we'll create another query and we'll take advantage of that new totals tool. Back to the Create ribbon, to Query Design. I do want those same tables, animal food and food orders. Close. Make sure that these guys are linked together, and I want to show this based off of order ID. Actually, I'll select that and choose delete columns. I would like to see this based off of the food name, and then I would like to see the line item total. So I'll just do the same item again, total, so you get to see it, price times quantity. Run it to make sure it works. Okay, fantastic. When you're using the totals tool in Design View, you want to only add 2 fields. I'll click here to select the tool, and it adds a new row, total. The reason why you only add 2 fields is because you want one field that you are going to group by. Here it makes sense only to group by one field, which will be food name, and then you have the second field, which is the value. I would like to see the sum. So, for example, I'm thinking, well, I want to know how much money I've spent on bananas in the time frame that my data exists. So I'm going to group by food name, and I'll see the sum of all my bananas. I'll click Run, and here we see it. $4,000 was spent on bananas. Almost $4,000 was spent on carrots as well. Let's see, what do we spend the most money on? Oranges. Oh, I wonder what animal eats oranges. There we have it. Go back into Design View. I could also check out the average that I spent on bananas. I'll click Run. On average, I spent $622 on bananas. I'll go back into Design View, and I'm ready just to save this query, and I will save this query as the totals in Design View. Okay, and I can close this. Now, to create a crosstab query, you can go into the Query Wizard, or you can design a query from scratch. Back to the Create ribbon, we'll choose the Query Wizard first off, and then we'll design one on our own. The crosstab query is the second selection. Okay, the prompts are starting. This prompt looks different than our other Query Wizard prompts. What will be the basis for my crosstab query? I'm going to base this on my memberships table. My goal here is to see, based on where a member lives and the date that they registered, how much in membership fees have I earned on a monthly basis? So my table will be memberships. I'll choose Next. I would like to have my row header based off of their location. So I'm going to choose City and I'm going to choose State. I have 2 row headers. Next. What will be my column headers? It defaults to the top item on the list, but I want this to be time-based, as so often you use across the top of crosstab queries. Registration date. Next. Well, what interval of time would I like? I know my database, and I know month is going to make sense since I really don't have anything that extends beyond 2007. However, isn't that great? You could take a look at quarterly stats or yearly numbers. Fantastic if you ask me. I'll choose Next. Now, what type of information would I like to see calculated in the middle here? Not the average of the membership ID. Instead, I want to see the membership fee, and I'd like to see a sum of that on a month-by-month basis. But take a look at that. If I had a different type of data sheet that I was looking at, I really could manipulate these numbers in a fantastic way. I have all these functions available to me here. And so summing of the membership fee is what makes sense to me. I can change that later if I'd like. I'll choose Next. What do I want to name my query? Memberships _ crosstab. Isn't that interesting that it put crosstab to the name here with an underscore? It didn't do that when I was in a previous queries nugget and created like an append query or a make table query. It just does this for crosstab. I'll leave it as the default, but good database design dictates that you use the same naming convention throughout all of your objects. Yes, I would like to view the query upon finish. Here we have our city and our state. I don't like how Access does this. It gives us a blank record here because in our queries by default, the last record that's displayed is a new record. So I could choose to add data if I wanted to. Because I have defaults in my base table, that's why I see Arizona and 150 as the value of the membership. So we'll just ignore that top row. But take a look. We have the total of all of our memberships from each location, and then we have our months broken down. So in January in Phoenix, we had a membership for $75 and one from Tempe for $100. If I scroll across, I can see that Phoenix really is the row that has the most information. I think we should send this query out to the marketing department so they can drum up some more memberships here for our poor little zoo. Let's go ahead and go back into Design View. So on the Home tab, I'll choose Design View, and I see this just like I always do. I have my base table that exists here, and I have my grid area, my QBE, Query by Example. Here, because it's a crosstab query, we have a new row called crosstab, and this indicates that we have a crosstab query instead of a select query, which is our default type of query, a crosstab. And these are depressed Anyway, so we are using that totals tool that we just took a look at. Table names has been depressed the whole time because that will show this row right here. I'll remove it, that row's gone, but I like to see what tables my fields are coming from. So this should make sense, right? We had city and state as our row headers and they were grouped together. Then we had our registration date as our column heading. Let's take a look at this syntax. I'll right click and choose zoom. It has chosen this to be displayed by month. So the field is registration date, comma, MMM is the month, and because format is a function, that's why the expressions are within the parentheses. I'll choose OK. And we have our membership fee, which is valued. Remember, that was summed together. And we also had a total column that summed all of the memberships for all of the months. I'll go ahead and close this crosstab query. Do I want to save changes? It's asking me. I didn't make any real changes except for resizing these items. So yeah, next time I go into design view, I don't want to resize. Let's create one more crosstab query, this time from scratch. So create ribbon, query design, and I would like to take a look at my animal inventory in my habitat. I want to know how many animals I have living in each type of habitat. So what do I want to use as my row header? I'd like to see the species of animals, so I'll double click here, and I would like to see, let's hit the crosstab button. So this species is going to be my row header, and I would like to see my habitat as my column header, and as my value, I want to count the number of species that exist per habitat. So guess what? I'm going to add the same field twice. Isn't that wild? But this time I'm going to choose value instead of a header. So I've got a row header, a column header, and the value. But what am I going to do with that value? Am I going to group it? No. I'm going to count it. I want to count the number of species I have per habitat. 3 columns is all I'm going to do, but you just saw that you can create your own calculated field, and so we could do that if we wanted to here to have a sum of all the species, but we don't need to do that. We're just going to run this with these 3 fields. Once I click run, you can see I have 7 different species. I have just a few different habitats, looks like 5 different habitats. Look at that, my polar bears in the polar region. My Bengal tigers are in the rainforest, as are my vampire bats. I have 5 animals total in the rainforest. I wonder if they're in the exact same cage, or if I have a few different rainforest habitats that exist out there. I have 2 crocodiles out there in the swamp and 1 lone gray wolf. So I'm going to click the Save button, and I will just call this Habitat and Species and click OK. So we have created a few different crosstab queries, and you can see that the icon is different for crosstab. The top 2 are crosstab, and the bottom 3 are select. After a while, you'll get used to the differences in the icons that are displayed for your query types. Well, queries can be very beneficial for our audience. They can see those calculations and they can really get the point of our data. So why not create these queries and then base a report off of these queries that we can print off, make look very nice, and then print off and then hand it to the people who need to read this data. So just to remind you, if you haven't taken the reports nugget, or if it's been a while, you can select the object and then go to the Create ribbon, and here just one simple button will show me a nicely formatted report. It's my memberships crosstab. Of course, I could change that to say something more valuable, and I see my cities, I see my states, I see my total of membership fee, and here's my month-by-month breakdown. Not too bad, not too bad. I could print this out. I probably would want to do a little bit of adjusting of the size since this extends across a few different pages. But my point here is you use your queries to put together information from your base tables. It takes the same data type as your base table, but on the fly, it will create a calculation, and then In order to give this information out to your audience, you can base a report off of that query. Of course, you can create calculations in your reports, you can create calculations in your forms, and you can create calculations in your queries, but please, please, please don't create calculations in your base tables. Clean up house here by closing this. Do I want to save changes? Sure, I'll call this membership crosstab 2 because I think I already have one. Okay. Now, what was it that we covered in this nugget? We talked about how valuable creating calculations in a query can be. By creating a new field, it's pretty simple to see results. You type the name of the field followed by a colon, and you use the proper expression, making sure to always insert your fields within those square brackets. There are a couple different ways that you can total information by using the click of a button. There's a new total row that you can display in your data sheet view, and this is new to Access 2007. And then there's the old standby in design view, which allows you to group information and then sum or show the minimum, the maximum, the standard deviation, or the average, among a few other things. Then the old standby crosstab query, which sometimes is a bit of a secret to many people, is a fantastic way to put together your information in a very smart yet succinct manner. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.